So you've got two things you're going to talk about. So you've got 20 minutes. First one's DCs, and second one's water.
Okay. Kia ora, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. So I'm David Hawke, Treasurer of Halswell Residents Association, and on my left is Ross McFarlane, who's one of our committee members. So in terms of our presentation, my role is to run a big picture ruler over our two submissions, and Ross is the one for some of the detailed questions. A sort of by the way, which is a sort of declaration of interest really, Ross is an elected member of the Halswell River Rating District Liaison Committee, which I'm sure you're all deeply familiar with. So this committee is run by ECAN, and it's quite an important point really, because it has oversight over the Huratini Halswell River from its source to Te Waihora, so very much a whole of catchment model, which we like very much. So we're going to talk first about local water done well. So as I've just said, what we're really looking for is a whole of catchment approach to outcomes. It's worth pointing out, as I'm sure you know, that all of our rivers have hydrological, ecological and cultural values, and we need those values to be respected. Obviously, they're important for the two rivers that have their headwaters in our part of the world, but it applies in general. So following on from this, our chosen option is the in-house model. We really like the option, how well it has worked in Halswell by, for example, providing stormwater basins well ahead of when they're actually needed, rather than continually playing catch-up, which is what happens with a lot of other infrastructure. So outline development plans are really important there because they allow that sort of forward planning to occur. It's a wee bit of a step sideways, but you really need to point out the value of those outline development plans and that forward-looking approach with central government when you talk to them about the fast track and RMA reform. We're very conscious of the fast track proposal for 35 hectares or 500 homes in Western Halswell, and we wonder what the planning is here from a local water done well perspective. And so outline development plan for that area, we wonder what that will look like, bearing in mind the legislation it's done under, and we would like to know, and I imagine you would too. So for this in-house option to actually work, the funding needs to be ring-fenced as proposed in your document and very carefully managed. We're absolutely emphatic that there's no cost sharing with Dunedin City Council. We really do not want that to happen. It's been canvassed through the media. If you read the Otago Daily Times, it's something that they are, it's come through in there. So it's a pretty careful newspaper. So it'd be worth getting a perspective as you discuss this reform on what the people over the other side of the river are talking about. Something that isn't in our submission but is really important to us is rainwater harvest, and we've long argued for rainwater harvest, and that goes back to Plan Change 60, which came through nearly 15 years ago now. And basically right across, what we see is our region takes its abundance of potable water for granted and misses the value of roof water, both as an asset that will save the city money and as less water runoff into the stormwater system. It's actually a very easy, low-cost retrofit, and we think that that needs to be included in your discussions. So to sum up, we like the way that the document has come through and given that high-level scoping, but our chosen option is the in-house model, but with a lot of care on the detail. So if we do a bit of a turn here, I'm not sure whether it's to the left or to the right, but we'll see, is the Development Contributions Policy Review. So something that we really, really appreciate is that we want to thank staff for their willingness to help us out with the detailed financial information for long-term projects as they affect Halswell, and for which the development contributions collected in Halswell have been applied. As I'm sure you're aware, there's quite a bit of detail in there. So that information just for Halswell is 7 pages, 400 projects. And it's actually worth going through line by line, and we commend that to you. We also acknowledge the time given to us by a staff member back in 2022 who went through the development contributions system with our executive committee. As I'm sure Councillor Moore reminds you on regular occasions, Halswell is the main growth area for Christchurch City. And we'll talk about other growth areas in a minute, because that's also really important when you think about development contributions. The issue we have, particularly in Halswell, is that we're running behind in the provision of community infrastructure, community facilities rather. As the policy and its proposed changes stand, this will continue, possibly get worse, and we actually don't like that. It is interesting that we're one of the few residents group submitters, and we wonder if this is because most of the city is actually well established and they already have these community facilities. There are some puzzles in the development contribution system, and they actually contribute to the problem as we see it. So here's one: costs and development contributions don't always add up. So project 67319, Quarryview Park, new play spaces. The spreadsheet says $14,500 is to be collected from DCs, 100% DC funded, but the community board approval is for $165,000. So there's a bit of a gap there. Here's another one. The project is 287 Cars Road Cycle and Pedestrian Overbridge over State Highway 76, the motorway. There's an underpass built by the Transport Agency just up the road, so there's actually no need for the bridge, but it's still in the LTP. And so far as we can see, there's no way for City Council to actually back out of these LTPs because development contributions have already been collected for them. The big issue, though, is money collected in Halswell is being spent in parts of the city with little collection to Halswell. So here's an example. Project 61772, Littleton Catholic Cemetery Extension Development. So Halswell is contributing to that project, which we are a little bit puzzled by. There are other projects, if we have time, which I don't think we will, but the Matatiki Hornby Centre is one of those. So, for whatever reason, the long-term plan, and we have to think of the development contributions process in concert with the long-term plan process. The long-term plan is pretty light on Halswell projects for whatever reason. So, given the City Council's financial situation, the result will be long-term scarring of Halswell because of this deficit. We need you as councillors to work together to overcome that deficit. Other growth areas like Preston's are going to have the same sort of area. So we support a more focused, not less focused, catchment system for development contributions. Something else is that our submission is focused on Halswell, but what about the development contributions in intensifying parts of the city?
Just to let you know, you still have got another 10 minutes, so don't panic. So that's the first 10 minutes. so don't try and rush yourself. You've got time up your sleeve.
Right, okay. That's very helpful because I was starting to get high blood pressure.
Yeah. And we don't need that.
Again.
Yeah, okay. So I think thanks, Mr. Mayor, that's really helpful. As I say, the more focused, not less focused catchment system for development contributions, and it's really important that they're spent in the area that they are collected. There are obvious exceptions to that in terms of things like Parakiore, those sort of metropolitan projects, but broadly speaking, they need to be spent in the area that they're gathered in. We understand that the mechanics of all of this is quite difficult, and we actually have struggled to understand the process. And we understand that there's going to be lots of unforeseen consequences, whatever you do. It's going to be complicated by change mandated from central government with the move to levies. And so that's an issue which although in principle is outside the actual policy review itself, I'm sure you're bearing it in mind. So, as I said before, these development contributions are inextricably linked to the long-term plan process, and that in itself is critically dependent on the interface between a community board and its community. And what we would like you to do is to think about how you might enhance that interface as you proceed with the development contribution policy review process. I think that's probably enough for now. So thanks for listening. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Tim and then Mark.
Thank you, and I understand, like spending money that's raised in an area to be spent in an area, but what do you say when I have areas like Summerfield and Spraydon? In fact, most of the wards in my area are affected by people driving from, say, Halswell to the central city. We've had another child hit recently. So what do you say about who should be paying for the upgrade of those intersections which school children are using, and drivers are driving faster and less, I guess, aware or concerned about those young people walking through?
Yeah.
Is that going to be the parents paying for their children's safety?
I think, no, thank you for that. But just going back to our submission, we were focused primarily on community infrastructure, neighbourhood parks and sports parks. Your point is really absolutely valid, and we don't object to those active travel road networks, sewer functions, those sort of infrastructures. So yeah, we're just in that things that affect our community in Halswell.
Yep, totally.
Okay, brilliant. Mark, then Yanni.
Thank you. Mine was very similar line of questioning, and the effect that the growth area has on the neighbouring major hubs, such as Hornby being next door to Halswell, that would come into your thinking as being valid to assist with that downstream effect as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
That catchment focus is, not bigger, smaller, integrated with the LTP and just constantly watched and managed. The point that we got from the staff when we got these spreadsheets is that we asked for the spreadsheets of DCs linked to project numbers. Now that was very beneficial for us to be able to go through the LTP, get a project number, as we've mentioned, line that up, what are our thoughts on that, and then follow it all the way through. And I'm not sure whether you get that information in that format. It is a massive spreadsheet. I'd love to be able to even design the spreadsheet, let alone have to work with it each day. But yeah, it's a really gnarly one when you start to break down by percentages and dollars. And going back to the scenario that David mentioned of the Catholic cemetery in Littleton, it's only 8 cents per housing unit equivalent. But it's just bringing all that together. How do you, what is a fair system? And as we've mentioned, it's not fair for the likes of Preston's or even Shirley Community Centre, and we have a fair community-based approach to our submission.
Yeah, so the thing I would add to that is it's really important not to look at these catchment boundaries as like concrete walls.
Yeah. It's a whole city approach. In that sense.
Thank you. Yanni, please.
Yeah, thank you for the submission. You referred to a number of detailed projects, so it's not in the written submission unless there's additional information. Is it possible to get a list of the projects that you've identified with the shortcomings so we can address it through the LTP?
Well, certainly, and we could add to it to a degree, but we don't want to get to that them and us scenario. It's just, how do you get a better system that focuses and services the growth in a system that is at the moment increasing DCs, but growth is relatively fallen, you could say.
I agree with you. Like in my area where I've got intensification, people struggle to see the projects that are going to offset the impact of that. But I think there's always been this chicken and egg situation. If we don't have something in the LTP, we can't collect DCs. If we've got it wrong in the LTP, as you're suggesting, around the DCs quantum, then the question then becomes, what do we do as we set the budget and as we set the DC policy? So it'll be interesting to see what the staff response is, particularly the ones that are under budgeted quite considerably. So the other question I had for you is, do you think there's a need for us to do more communication and engagement around how DCs are set and how projects are identified and scoped?
I could perhaps, because Ross is the person that knows the system in our context, we were oblivious to how the system worked. It was just a black box as far as we were concerned, and having someone sit down and work through that was enormously valuable. So, and where people with grey hair have got time to spend on this sort of thing, so the awareness of how this works, I would say even among some of our elected members, is not necessarily all that high. And I think that awareness really needs to be sharpened, because as has been really rammed home to us, if it's not in the long-term plan, then you're out of luck. And like your intensification question, well, how are you going to get people in your area, if they don't know that the system works in the way that it does, to actually use those development contributions for community infrastructure in your areas being intensified? Absolutely.
Thank you. That's very good. No more questions. You've still got some time, but if you're happy, I'm happy.
No, just reiterate the help that staff have been to us, and the fact that they knew DC review was coming up, and they started talking to us a long time ago, and the knowledge that most of the growth is in the area. So yeah,
it certainly is a big box with lots of tentacles in and out of it. So, so thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll skip to Diane.